morning and welcome to Rising. I'm Amber Athey and I'm joined by Jessica Burbank. We've got some breaking news to get into this morning, so let's get right to it.
It has been confirmed by multiple sources that California Senator Dianne Feinstein has passed away at the age of 90. First elected to the Senate in 1992, Feinstein served 3 decades as a Democratic senator from the Golden State, the longest serving member of the Senate Democratic Conference. During her Senate tenure, she left a mark on a range of issues, including national security and gun control. Feinstein had been struggling with her health and had missed some work this week, as reported by The Hill. Prior to that, she had been suffering from health issues for several months.
Statements of recognition have begun to pour out from both sides of the aisle. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Dianne Feinstein, right from the start, was an icon for women in politics. And Senator Chuck Schumer said she's a legend in California as the first woman senator, a legend in the Senate. She was the leader on so many different issues. Here's House Rules Committee Chair Republican Tom Cole asking for a moment of silence in a meeting this morning after hearing the news.
And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair is very sad to announce there are unconfirmed reports of the passing of Senator Feinstein. So I know many of us had the opportunity to deal with her, and certainly all of us on both sides of the aisle respect her. I would ask before we proceed that we observe a moment of silence in recognition and memory of our colleague on the other side of the rotunda.
As Punchbowl News notes, Feinstein's death will set off a scramble in California as Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom is expected to appoint a caretaker for her seat to serve through the 2024 election. So lots of shakeups in the Democratic caucus. We have the drama with Menendez, and now Feinstein's seat entirely open. Her death is something that, we don't know what the cause of it was. Unfortunately, we all know what the cause of it was. She was 90 years old and serving in the Senate. She already had her daughter serving with power of attorney. And I think this whole situation would have been a bit better if she stepped down before things got to this point. I think a lot of members of the U.S. Congress would agree with that. They saw her in meetings not be fully present. Unfortunately, we have a lot of members serving in public office experiencing cognitive decline. Of course, it's always sad whenever there's a death or the loss of life, but I think this is a good time to reflect on her legacy, and maybe retiring in a timely manner should have been a part of her legacy as well. It's really sad to see.
Yeah, I agree. I think this situation is made all the more tragic by the fact that she was literally working up until her death. She was counted on a vote just yesterday as voting for a piece of legislation. And this morning we find out that she passed away. That, I think, is elder abuse. People should not be working up until the age of 90 to the point where they actually pass away while they're still on the job. It's absolute insanity. She should have stepped down years ago before some of her mental issues started. Her Democratic colleagues were speaking anonymously to news outlets as many as 2 years ago, warning about her cognitive decline. And when someone is in that state, when someone is basically in hospice care at this point, they should be spending their remaining years with their family and at home, not shuttling back and forth between Washington, D.C. and their home state of California and trying to, take on the schedule of a senator. So this situation, I agree, is made all the more sad by the way that she was treated in her final years. And you can only place so much blame on Senator Feinstein herself because she, again, had these cognitive deficiencies. She needed the people around her to be able to take her out of this situation and take care of her. And instead, they just had this death grip on power. She was hospitalized with shingles earlier this year. She was out of the Senate for several months. When she finally got back, we found out that we didn't even hear the full extent of her condition. She ended up developing encephalitis and some other complications from her illness. And there was that infamous clip that we ran on this show where she was confused about what was going on when she returned to the Senate, and then was confused when she was sitting down in a vote and thought that she was supposed to give a speech, and her staffers had to tell her to vote yay on the legislation. So across the board, this is a good reminder of just how geriatric our Congress has become and the sadness that's associated with the obsession with power to the point that you end up pushing this woman basically to her grave.
And literally pushing. You had Nancy Pelosi's daughter pushing Feinstein around the halls of Congress in a wheelchair. If that's not a perfect metaphor, and it's not even a metaphor because it's literally what happened, but Nancy Pelosi, the speaker's daughter, pushing Feinstein around the halls of Congress in a wheelchair, it's really, a metaphor for the Democratic establishment keeping the old guard in office, not letting a new generation with new ideas come in and serve and represent the people and their ideas. I think a good solution for the age problem we have in Congress, the oldest Congress in history, could be solved by a simple policy like, well, if we want the retirement age to be 65 in the United States of America, members of Congress should have to retire at the age of 65. I think that's a fine policy. We have members of the Republican caucus wanting to raise the retirement age to 69. That's a really tough age to keep working if you're doing physical labor. And I think members of Congress might have a skewed perspective as to what it means to work into your elder years, because it's not a physically taxing job to serve as a member of Congress. Sure, you have to stay up late, you have to sit in meetings, but imagine a coal miner, imagine a carpenter. That's a really tough age to retire. So I think, when we consider the retirement age that Congress is going to hopefully not change, but is considering raising to 69, that's really concerning. But I think members of Congress should retire at whatever that age is, where Medicare kicks in and where Social Security benefits kick in.
Yeah, your point is well taken. My dad was a plumber his whole life. He passed away at 59. And the idea that he would have been able to work another 6 years with the physical demands on his body is just absurd. I don't think there was any way that he was going to make it. And I think at the very least, for Congress, since it's not a physically taxing job, we should implement something like Nikki Haley has suggested multiple times throughout her presidential campaign, where these people have to take some type of cognitive test to prove that they're still able to do the job, because we have not just Dianne Feinstein, who, rest in peace, is now gone, but we also still have Mitch McConnell in the Senate, who has had multiple freezing episodes while talking to reporters and staff. We have Joe Biden in the White House, who is confused about where he even is and what he's supposed to be doing on a weekly, if not daily basis. John Fetterman, who requires significant aids just to do the basics and spent several weeks in the hospital suffering from severe depression. The people around them need to say that you need to step aside and take care of yourself. But barring that, there needs to be some kind of regulation or limit on when people are able to serve Americans if they're not cognitively able to do so. I think we have to look at what comes next here too as well, because Governor Gavin Newsom of California is going to be able to choose Dianne Feinstein's replacement. The short list seems to be made up of a few different people, including Adam Schiff, who was Speaker Nancy Pelosi's pick, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who I believe is the top choice for Gavin Newsom because he's committed to appointing a black woman. And then Katie Porter was already running for election once Feinstein planned to retire. Some people have suggested that Gavin Newsom should also appoint Kamala, and then he should take over as VP. So any number of scenarios. I've even seen Meghan Markle's name floated out there. It seems to me like the most likely scenario is Barbara Lee, but I don't know. I wanted to get your take on this, Jess, because I don't really understand the commitment to appointing just a black woman. It's like identity politics. I would prefer that he just appoint somebody who's the most qualified and maybe is most in line with the policies that he wants to see. We saw Biden do the same thing with picking Kamala, and that didn't turn out so well.
Right. Yeah. I think the most important thing when we consider that representation matters is that pick actually going to represent the community that they come from well. We had Kamala be the top cop in California and want to send mothers to jail and prison for truancy issues because their kids were absent at school. That's not going to solve this problem of kids being absent at school or empower mothers to become better parents. So I think when we consider representation and the identity politics of it all, you want a member of the community that's going to represent the community well. And I think Barbara Lee is a good pick simply because she's a member of Congress that's an independent thinker with a lot of foresight. She was the lone vote against the Iraq War. She's someone who assesses political issues from an independent perspective, despite being kind of a loyal member of the Democratic Party. She is a progressive. Gavin Newsom does run as a progressive when we think about national issues, probably not for California standards, but Newsom is, by national standards in the U.S., a progressive. Barbara Lee would be a good pick for those reasons. And I wish he had put forth those reasons as to why she was the pick, rather than just is committed to appointing a Black woman. So I think she's the best pick. I think it would be controversial to pick Katie Porter, someone who's already running for Senate. But there is this dynamic of when we have the succession of members of Congress being chosen by the governor of this state, now whoever is put in that seat is a household name. People have that name recognition. So then ultimately when they run for office, they're more likely to win. It allows the party to kind of handpick who they want in these seats when this happens. And if Dianne Feinstein had retired in a timely manner, we could have had a proper Democratic election instead of someone who's a member of the party establishment picking who comes in next. And so that's why I'm super critical of the process as a whole. I think Barbara Lee would be a great pick, but I don't think we're going to get that lucky.
Yeah, that's a great point about, basically eschewing a Democratic election by Democrats handpicking the successor, because, as you said, whoever gets appointed to this seat is almost certainly going to win the special election when it comes around. So really doesn't give voters much of a say, unfortunately. Another sad side effect of the death of Dianne Feinstein. But of course, we hope that her soul rests in peace. We hope that her family is doing well, and we'll be thinking and praying for everybody who knew her. All right, we're going to leave it there. We'll be back with more Rising after this.